Good evening, everyone. We are in Isaiah chapter 29. And as usual, I think all of us need to be aware that the book of Isaiah, as we go chapter by chapter, is not in any particular chronological order. Each chapter describes a particular set of prophecies, and the prophecies doesn't flow one to another. And so each of them is actually quite independent of itself. At the same time, the prophecies are actually expressed through Isaiah in a very poetic language. And so we have to learn to read and look at the imagery that's projected by the poetic language that is being expressed. It begins this way. In verse 1, this word woe is hoi. That's the sound of the word hoi in the Hebrew language. And it's a very sad, disappointed interjection, right? It's sad. It's like a disappointment. In the English, you'd find equivalent words like alas, and that kind of an expression. And then it talks about Ariel, the city where David dwelt, or David encamped. So let me just briefly express this Ariel. Now, you know the word, it comes from two words, by the way, Ari and El. And Ari is lion, and El is God, or the mighty one. So the lion of the mighty one. Now, the lion of God, or Ariel, generally refers to a number of things that we can actually understand it to be. It is used for heroes. This is in 2 Samuel 23, verse 20. It is used for Jerusalem and also Judah. And this is in Genesis 49 and in verse 9. It is with reference to the altar in the temple, Ezekiel 43, verse 15. It is also with reference to the people of Israel. It is in Numbers 23 and 24. I think one more that you can actually think of is that the temple itself, by design, looks like a crouching lion. And the reason that they say it is because the inner part of the sanctuary is narrower than the front part of the sanctuary. And no, it's based on an observation. But nevertheless, when we talk about Ariel right here, it is about the altar. So it could refer to the altar. It could also refer to Jerusalem. And it is important for us to realize that Ariel as a name refers to something very important to God. It is with reference to where David lived or encamped. This word dwelt is encamped. And God is now complaining about Israel. See, you add year to year. Let feasts come around. Now, this is a problematic translation. So you add year to year, and this line is wrong. It should read until your, well, I guess you could say your feasts or festivals uh come, I guess you can say, come to an end, be struck off or terminate. Now, this is a better translation. And so, what it tells us is that God is complaining about the Israelites, particularly the southern kingdom of Judah. And in the city where the temple is, they will do this year by year to have their festivals. And this festival will come to an end. Now, this is a prophecy regarding to the end of the city, the end of the temple in particular, because the feast days are held at the temple. So this is a prophecy that the temple will come to an end because year on year they are doing these feasts that God doesn't appreciate. They are adding year to year of doing feasts that God finds it repulsive. That would be the picture of verse 1. Verse 2 continues, yet I will oppress Ariel. This is oppress. And the oppression, or the, I would say, the judgment upon Ariel shall be heaviness and sorrow. Now, this word heaviness and sorrow, uh, I guess you could say distress, uh, agony, I guess, agony and grief. What basically we are told is that there will come a time that God will apply agony and sorrow to Ariel, and it shall be to me as Ariel. So God himself is also grieved because of what God will do to Ariel. And then we see a more graphic detail of this affliction of heaviness and sorrow in verse 3. It says, I will encamp against you all around. I will lay siege against you with a mound, and I will raise siege works against you. Now, all of these are basically an a B, and a C. It speaks about a siege. The siege will happen one day. At this point in time, there is no siege. God says, I will stay around you. So the idea of encamp in verse 3 is to camp in a circle. If this is the city, camp in a circle will be like this. And so God says, I will camp in a circle. This is a siege. Lay siege is to bind on a post. Now that's the idea here, is to confine you to an entrenchment. As a siege actually would be a good way of talking about it. So lay siege, siege works, and camp against. All this is talking about the siege. Now, when is there a siege around Jerusalem? Ariel being Jerusalem. This will be at the time of Hezekiah. And it is a time of Sennacherib. Now, the time of Sennacherib, I guess it's important for us to remember because this is a time of a supernatural deliverance, right? So you shall be brought down, you shall speak out of the ground, your speech shall be low out of the dust, your voice shall be like a medium out of the ground, your speech shall whisper out of the dust. So think of it this way, this is an A, B, C, D, and E. All this will be saying that whatever lofty speech they have, it will be trembling. These are all depictions of tremors in the speech. God says you will come to a point where in the time of the siege, you will tremble as if you think you are going to die. Now, in this case, yes, it will depict a future reference of Hezekiah. At the time, even Isaiah is still there in Jerusalem with Hezekiah, with Sennacherib, uh, surrounding or laying a siege with 185,000 men. Just imagine, it is a trembling voice because they cannot imagine how they can actually get out of this predicament. It appears to them that this would be the end of Jerusalem. I mean, you just think of it, 185,000 strong army uh, surrounding Jerusalem, waiting for Jerusalem to fall. You as Hezekiah, as Isaiah, as the people that's inside the city, you have nothing much to say except to tremble in fear of the impending doom of the city. So that would be the picture that's being painted in verses 3 and 4. Now, in verse 5, it tells us, moreover, the multitude of your foes. Now, verse 5 is not quite like that. It does say your foes, but the word here are strangers. The I guess you could say the multitude of strangers, foreigners. Now, this being the Assyrians, and with Sennacherib, 185,000 strong army. The prophecy is saying that entire multitude of the strangers shall become like fine dust. I think this should be better described as let's see, thin dust or fine dust. I think it's good, right? Fine dust of the ground. And then the next line is, and the multitude of the terrible ones. First your foes, and then the terrible ones. I guess the terrible ones, you can call them terror striking ones, right? Terror striking ones. Basically, the Assyrians, wherever they go, they strike terror in the hearts of their opponents. They will become like chaff that passes away. Now, chaff, as you know, is the remnants, the husk of the wheat. And then it will be passing away, it will be blown away. Yes, it shall be in an instant, suddenly. Now, these words are very, very strange when you first read it. This word, in an instant, literally means in a wink of an eye. And then the word suddenly is a word that means very surprisingly. Right? Very surprisingly. It also means instantly. And so this you can see as an A and a B. Basically, the prophecy here says that the enemies, the strangers who are surrounding you, they will become like fine dust. They will become like chaff very suddenly. Without you realizing it, it has happened. Now, this is a prophecy that refers to the angel of the Lord destroying the entire 185,000 strong army of Sennacherib, basically over the night. And then in the daytime, Sennacherib is running home, tail between his legs. Now, this is a prophecy. And so look at the prophecy as a picture. Remember, I said that this is in a poetic language. It's in a picture and imagery that you can actually view in your mind the extent of the damage to the Assyrians. Verse 6. You will be punished, and this word is visited. Now, understand that this word pakat has a dual meaning. God visits you in a good way, or God visits you in a bad way. And so when God visits you in a good way, that will be blessing. And God visiting you in a bad way will be judgment. In this case, verse 6, God is visiting. Jehovah Tzevaot is visiting you in a bad way. And so he will come with thunder, with earthquake, with a great noise, with storm, with tempest, and a flame of devouring fire. Now, typically you find that all of this is the image of Mount Sinai. This will be in Exodus chapter 19, when God appeared to Moses and the entire entourage from the Exodus. But in this case, in verse 6, in the same similitude of the presence of God as all this, thunder, earthquake, great noise, storm, tempest, flame of devouring fire, is very much the Assyrians coming in 185,000 strong army, and it represents the presence and wrath of God. And that's basically saying God is punishing Israel, or Judah in this case. In verse 7, the multitude of all the nations. Now, the multitude of all the nations, and this word nations here is goyim, basically non-Israel, will fight against Ariel. Even all who fight against her and her fortress and distress her shall be as a dream of a night vision. Now, think of it this way. There are two words here that we need to understand. The first word here is a dream. Well, halom is a dream. Basically, something that you dream in the night. The second word here is chadzon. It's an ecstatic vision, right? A vision in a dream that is awake. Now that's as best as I can try to help us understand. This is very much like a prophetic dream, like a vision, and all of this happens at night, right? At night, you can find that Daniel awaits the night to speak to God about the dream of Nebuchadnezzar. And in the night is when all these occurrences happen, because it is actually during the sleep that God interacts with the prophets. And so God says, all of these happening is very much like a dream of a night vision. It shall be even as, remember, as means it's like a picture. When a hungry man dreams and look, he eats, but when he awakes, his soul is still empty. Or when a thirsty man dreams and look, he drinks, but he awakes, and indeed he is faint. Now, verse 8, when it says it's faint, uh, it literally means that he is still exhausted, thirsty, thirst uh, of weariness. So basically, it is trying to say his soul still craves. So hungry, he thinks he is eating, and this is in a dream. And then he wakes up from his dream, while his nephesh, right, is still empty. Now, the idea of empty here means that there is nothing in the stomach, because he ate only in a dream. When a man is thirsty and dreams, he thinks that he is drinking, he wakes up, he is still exhausted, he's still thirsty, and his nephesh still longs for water. And so the multitude of all the nations shall be who fight against Mount Zion. Now, again, here, this is the Goyim. And I think we need to look at the connection here with here, right? And the prophecy is basically saying something very simple, actually. It's saying that as Sennacherib, the Assyrians, come and fight against Jerusalem, it will be as if they are dreaming. They dream of surrounding Jerusalem, they dream of attacking Jerusalem, but when they wake up in the morning, nothing actually happened. That is the picture. And this case, it basically tells us that it is happening dream at night, and when they wake up, right, wake up in the morning, there was no fight. In fact, they were destroyed. And so God is also making a prophecy against those nations who are coming against Israel. Now, a couple of things to take note of. We're talking about nations, and in this case, you might be able to tell that, no, this is talking about the Assyrians who would come one day, and it could also be looking at Gog and Magog, right? The Assyrians, and then Gog and Magog of Ezekiel 38, 39. In both cases of the Goyim coming against Israel, coming against Jerusalem in this case, they will fail. And God is the one who will fight the battle. Now, verse 9 tells us something more practical. Verse 9 is God being very upset with the Israelites, particularly the Jews of the southern kingdom, and tells them to pause and wonder. The word pause here is to linger. So instead of walking, you just wait. The second word here is wonder. And wonder here means be stunned. Right? Be astonished. Now, this is a very important phrase because it comes over in the prophecy as an imperative. It is to tell the Jews or the southern kingdom of Judah, just sit and think hard and think of what has been said about what God is going to do to you. And what is God going to do to the nations who come after you? But more important, to you, the southern kingdom of Judah. And it says here, blind yourselves and be blind. Now, verse 9 doesn't actually quite say this. It is not blind yourselves and be blind. So let me just strike this out. It says they have been utterly blind and blinded others, basically. So this is a complaint against the Jews. They are drunk, but not with wine. They stagger, but not with intoxicating drink. Now, this is an A and a B. But more importantly, we need to express and understand this verse. They have been utterly blind and blinded. The word here for blind is a very interesting word, and it is to, how should we say it? I think it is to paste. I guess we could say paste, right? It is to paste or glue their eyes. So they have been utterly blind. Literally means this, that they have pasted or glued up their eyes. It is not that their eyeballs were poked and that they are now blind. They have closed their eyes. Their eyes can't open to see. So they've done something to themselves. This is the meaning. They have done something to themselves. This is how the Hebrew is expressing it. They are doing it to themselves. They appear drunk, but it is not because they have drunk too much wine. They stagger around because they can't walk straight, right? They walk in they can't walk in a straight line. Okay, it is not because of strong drinks. They are actually not seeing the truth of God. They have chosen not to look at the Torah of God. And so the Lord then, in verse 10, is saying, since you don't want to see, then God has poured out on you the spirit of deep sleep and has closed your eyes, the prophets, and covered your heads, the seers. And so the intent of God saying this is that when it comes to this point, well, you will not be able to see what you are supposed to see. The spirit of deep sleep. Now, the idea of deep sleep is like a trance. You think you're sleeping, but you are not waking up. And this idea, the spirit, this idea of spirit is a wind. It displays the character. So it seems to say that God is now invoking on you, since you don't want to see. Well, you can't see then, that you have closed right? The idea of close your eyes is to shut tightly by not having you understand the prophets. He has covered your heads. And the idea of covering your heads is to put a cover over the heads so that you can't see anymore. And so the seers uh, appear not to see, right? I guess you find that all these instructions and leadership will be covered up. Now, I guess the picture that God is trying to say here is, since you are really not wanting to see and you close your eyes, fine, I'll let your eyes be closed. And that is the picture that is being painted here. Verse 11, it says, the whole vision has become to you like the words of a book that is sealed, which men deliver to one who is literate, telling him to read this, please. And he says, I cannot read, for it is sealed. Now think of it. The book is sealed, or the scroll is sealed, and it is passed on to one who can read. But the one who can read gives an excuse that I cannot read, not because I don't know how to read, but because it is sealed. Now, the idea here of seal is to affix a seal, or that it is fastened up. So if you have a scroll, and the scroll has a tie around it, right? It is tied up. And so that's called seal. And so the one who can actually read is saying, I cannot read because somebody has tied it up. And then the opposite happens. The scroll is delivered to one who cannot read. And then he's told to read this, and he says, I cannot read. So what you can see is that this is a proverb, right? One who can't read, and this is cannot read. And this book is not sealed. Notice, not sealed. But he says, I am not literate. And so basically, excuses. And these are pointing towards the southern kingdom, who is giving excuses, whether you can read, you don't read, you can read, you don't want to read, you cannot read, and you literally don't know. And God begins a few verses to describe about the condition of the Jews. Therefore, God says, Jehovah said, he says, inasmuch as these people draw near with their mouths and honor me with their lips. And so you need to see that this is an A and a B. It's about speech. It's about speech. And draw near and honor me. They are both about the same idea. Drawing near is to pay respect or honor to God. And so to honor is to put importance. And by doing so, they're using their mouth, their words, right? Their mouth, their words, whatever come out of their lips And God says, but have removed their hearts far from me. The word far here is very distant. Very distant. And we talk about hearts. Remember, I had said hearts is not just the heart in an abstract form. This is about the will, about decisions. And the will of the people is not even near the will of God. And their fear toward me is taught by the commandment of men. So the fear toward God, it is important to realize that the idea of fear is what God has said: fear God, be afraid of God, so that you would choose to do the right things. This is now taught by men. So men have replaced God. Men have replaced the Torah. And then God says, therefore, behold, I will again do a marvelous work. Now, these words, marvelous, literally means wonderful. It is difficult to understand, right? Difficult to understand. It is extraordinary. God will add to all the great works that he has done among this people a marvelous work and a wonder. Now, verse 14 talks about Pele. A Pele means something that is a wonderful work, is a work of God that is wonderful. The second word here, wonderful, one is pala and one is pele, and both really talks about the same thing. It is something that God will do that you cannot quite explain. And so we have then a description of something that God will do. And it is not easy to express in words. It is not a miracle to bless them. It is a miracle that they can't understand how God can actually punish them. That actually, in general, you find that the miracles of God is actually done to teach people a lesson. Like the miracles in Egypt, crossing the Red Sea, all these miracles is to teach them who God is. But it is spectacular, it is unexplainable, and it's supposed to turn them around. But and of course, right now it goes to show that they are refusing to see the greatness of God. And it says, for the wisdom of their wise shall perish, and the understanding of their prudent shall be hidden. Now, what does this mean? This is another A and a B, by the way. And so, wisdom of their wise people shall perish. Understanding is similar to wisdom and knowledge of their prudent wise men shall perish, hidden. Now, the second part, hidden, here is concealed. The first part here, perish, means to be lost, to vanish. So the idea here is whatever the wise people in the southern kingdom may think of, God is going to zero it. God is going to reset them. God is going to remove all of that. And how is God going to do that? In a wonderful way that you cannot express in words. That's what this prophecy is talking about. Verse 15, Hoi, To those who seek deep to hide their counsel far from God, and their works are in the dark, they say, who sees us and who knows us? This is how they are trying to hide their sins. They think that if they do it in the dark, nobody will see. And that includes God. That's what they are saying. And so God says, oh, this is a disappointment. Surely you have things turned around. And God is saying, shall the potter be esteemed as the clay? Think of it, the potter is not the clay. For the thing made say of him who made it, he did not make me. This is not wise. The thing made would be the clay. Him who made it is the potter. Can you say this? This is very strange. Or shall the thing formed say of him who formed it, he has no understanding? This is an A and a B. Both are saying that these people of Judah is impossible. They are speaking nonsense. It does not make sense. Verse 17, is it not yet very little while till Lebanon shall be turned into a fruitful field, the fruitful field be esteemed as a forest? The idea here is a fruitful field would be a cultivated field. It is a meaningful field, purposeful. And Lebanon is a forest of wood. The fruitful field be esteemed as a forest, the reverse. So it has no purpose, it's just growing. In that day, the deaf shall hear the words of the scroll, the eyes of the blind shall see out of obscurity, out of darkness, the words of the book by implication. And I want to point out to you verse 19. The humble shall increase their joy in the Lord. The poor shall rejoice in the Holy One of Israel. And so in that day, the day in the future, in the day of the Lord, the meek, the poor shall rejoice. Both of these are same words. They will have joy. They will be very happy in God. And these words are to say that those who can't help themselves will be the ones who will jump for joy, who can see that day when God judges and make the day appear, they will be very happy. But the ones who are not happy are these, the terrible ones will be brought to nothing. The scornful one is consumed. All who watch for iniquity are cut off. Basically, these are the people who are not happy when the day of the Lord comes, who makes a man an offender by speaking a word, lay a snare for him who reproves at the gate. These are the judges, and turn people, the just, aside by empty words, basically leading the people astray by words of men. They will not be happy, but the oppressed, the meek, the humble, the poor, those who cannot help themselves, they will rejoice in that day. Verse 22, therefore, in conclusion, says Jehovah, who redeemed Abraham concerning the house of Jacob. This is talking about the house of Jacob, which is Israel. In that day, Jacob will not be ashamed, nor shall his face grow pale. Now they may, because when they see all the enemies One day he won't. When he sees his children, when Abraham sees his children, the work of my hands, in his midst they will hallow my name. Make holy my name and hallow the Holy One of Jacob. Set him apart and fear the God of Israel, which they did not fear. All of this will come back to faithfulness of the remnant. When they see God, they who erred in spirit will come to understand that they have done wrong, and those who complain will learn teaching. Now, this idea here in the last, will learn teaching, the teaching or instruction, and those who complain, these will be the ones who murmur, who grumble. Now they know the truth, but it has to come through a time of terrible events. One of the things that we had learned in the previous chapter is that when God punishes his people, it is not to destroy them, but to engage them to repentance. And when they finally do not, well, chapter 29 describes the siege that God will lay upon them, visit them with punishment. But all through the chapter, it is to help them see the power of God and the anger of God that can happen if they do not repent. And so I think a good lesson learned is for us to realize that God says what he means what he says, but if his people do repent, God can actually pull back his judgment. But in this case, it sees that at the end, there will be a remnant of faithful, and they will learn to fear, they will learn to consecrate God, they will learn to fear God, they will learn to see God in their midst, and they will learn the error of their ways, to know the truth and to do what is right. And that is the end game of how God gave this prophecy. And with this, we come to the end of our session today.